the show with me, Dan, and my guest, Suzanne. How you doing, Suzanne?
I'm good, thanks, Dan. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I think you're the first guest who has a rhyming name, so that's fun. But yeah, so it's actually been a while since I last released a podcast episode. So yeah, I think it's been like a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks or something. But it's good to get back into it again. And
Okay.
yeah, I think I'll just introduce sort of how I know you and sort of what we're sort of going to be talking about. But yeah, so I know Suzanne because she's my dad's wife, and I've known her for about 4 years or so.
About that, I think, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, Suzanne approached me with this subject, which I thought was a really, really good idea for a subject. And yeah, so basically it's sort of around, this is where the doom and gloom sound effects come in, the crash of lightning. It's all around the sunny subject of death. So, so at this point, I think people will either go, "Oh, no, not interested," or they'll be like, "Oh, no, I want to hear more." So, but yeah, we're going to be talking about death, and there's a few reasons behind that. But maybe I thought it might be a good to bring you in here, Suzanne, and maybe just sort of introduce sort of a little bit about why this was a subject you are interested in or are interested in talking about today.
Okay, so I was an undertaker for a year. I have always been really, I suppose, a bit of a morbid curiosity around death. I've always been really interested in the human body, in anatomy, what happens to us when we die. It's just a subject that's always fascinated me. But there's not an awful lot of information out there.
Right.
It's kind of like a dirty little secret that's swept under the carpet that nobody wants to talk about. And I think that's wrong in a way. In my opinion, I think it should be talked about. People talk about birth all the time. Why not talk about death? Why not, explore that subject?
And were you interested in death before you had the job?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first loss I suffered was at the age of 20 when I lost my father really suddenly. He was 50 and was just found dead of a heart attack at home. And that was kind of my first real loss of anybody.
Yeah.
The first experience I'd ever had around death.
Wow. Yeah.
And, obviously it was devastating and ripped our family apart, but it was always the dirty secret that wasn't talked about. Nobody ever spoke about it.
What, in your family? It just wasn't talked about.
Yeah, it was just, I think everyone was so afraid that, we'd upset mum or all those memories would come back. And I found that really strange. I found that I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to talk about the physical experience of finding my dad and all what happened afterwards, but there was nobody to talk to about it.
Were they like avoiding talking about him, or just sort of the death part of it?
I think in the early days it was both. And then I suppose, yeah, it was just people think you're morbid and you're weird if you want to rake over that kind of stuff. And my mum was in a very bad place. She was only 45, so she was in a very bad way. So I suppose there was that kind of preservation around it. Nobody wanted to be the person that would talk about it around mum, I suppose. And so it just never happened.
So what?
I think
sorry, carry on. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think as the years went by, obviously we talk about my dad all the time now, and we did, as time went by, but no one really talks about his death and what happened.
So what sort of conversations did you want to have, and why did you think they would have been important?
Do you know, at that time I'm not even sure, Dan. It was, I suppose sharing the emotions of that moment. What did you think about that? What do you think mum felt? What do you think my younger brother and sister felt about that? And not really knowing the physical things that happened to dad once he was taken away from the house. That to me really, really bothered me. But I didn't feel like I could ask because people would think I was weird.
Right.
But You know, I wanted to know what happened to my dad. He was just whisked out of the house, and we didn't see him again until he was at the funeral home, and nobody really spoke about what happened in between that time.
Why do you
And that
think
was
it?
that.
Why do you think that is? Why? I mean, I don't know if you can just comment on why it might be your family didn't talk about it, or maybe society at large. But why do you think there is this hesitation and sort of, like you say, a label of weirdness and
Yeah, I think it's the unknown. I think people think you're weird, you're morbid, there's something wrong with you. Why do you want to know about that? Why do you need to know about that? I mean, my daughter, you mentioned it to her, and she was disgusting, absolutely disgusting. Why do you want to do that job? It's disgusting. And when I dig a bit deeper and say, what's disgusting? What what about somebody dying is disgusting? Well, what happens to them? And I try and say to her, well, if that was Nanny that had died, would Nanny suddenly become disgusting? Or is she still Nanny? Just,
mm,
you know, a dead Nanny?
yeah,
What makes it so disgusting? Oh, it's just the physical thing of what happens. Why do you want to be around that? Why do you want to know about that? Why do you want anything to do with that? And I found there's kind of two camps on this. There's the people that say, I don't want to know anything, don't tell me. Disgusting. I don't want to know anything about it. I don't need to know any of that. And then there's the people that go, oh, really? So
mm,
what happens?
mm,
Or then there's the kind of people in between that say, oh, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. But when you die, but just tell me, oh, no, I don't want to know.
right,
But
yeah,
what happens to this? So there's kind of there is that curiosity there, but they feel it's almost wrong to voice it. I
yeah.
think it's just a taboo subject for some reason. I don't know why. I don't understand it, but and I never have done. But it definitely is a taboo subject.
Yeah, people sort of had this fascination with it, and it's almost like a bit of shame, isn't it? That people like they clearly some people want to talk about it, but they feel ashamed to even talk about it. Like you're saying, this
Yeah,
sort of weird
absolutely.
thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And and people that I used to deal with in the funeral industry, families that I used to deal with were the same. There were two distinct camps. The one camp that didn't want to know anything. Let's just get these arrangements done. I don't want to know anything. And then the camp that really wanted to know everything.
So, do you think you've always been in the camp of wanting to know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I can remember going to see my dad in the Chapel of Rest and desperately, and this sounds really creepy and really weird, but desperately wanting to see under his shirt as to what had happened to him because I knew he'd had a post-mortem.
Right.
And desperately, I couldn't bring myself to do it, but I can remember desperately wanting to know what had happened to him. What had they done to him?
So
Very, very
what
strange.
was that fascination then? Because I can imagine that fascination coming from many different angles. You know, there's people who want to go into a medical profession or are interested in the medical profession and would have that fascination because they're interested in the human body, for example.
Mhm.
For
Mhm.
you, was it because it was an emotional thing of like someone's been touching your dad and you want to know what happens before he goes in the ground or cremated or whatever? Like, do you know what?
Yeah, I think it was a bit of both. Like I say, I've always been really interested in the human body. It fascinates me, always has done from an early age. Never wanted to go into anything medical, mind you, but just was always fascinated with how the body works, how amazing it is, the things that can go wrong with it, the things that it does that are just miraculous. So there was a bit of that, but there was also, that's my dad. What
Mm,
what have you done to him? What's somebody done to him? It was just, yeah, just a weird curiousness, I suppose. Just, I'm not sure that my sister felt the same. But again, we never had that conversation. It just
mm.
didn't come up. I never felt like I could ask the funeral director. It just wasn't something I ever felt was right. It felt very wrong.
Do you think it's a respect thing? Do you think some people think that if you were to look at that stuff, it's almost like out of respect you don't go there type thing?
I think at that time I thought that. Now I don't think that at all.
Right.
But I think possibly at that time there may have been a little bit of that. Yeah, because I also think at that time I was on the cusp of, I always believed in God and heaven and afterlife. But when my dad passed away, that changed completely. It was
Mm.
almost like a switch went off.
Right.
So possibly around that time, I was kind of not sure about my faith and what that meant. So yeah, but now absolutely not. It wouldn't bother me at all.
So what changed for you then? What
From
why?
when my dad died, why I lost my
Yeah.
faith.
Yeah.
I can remember the moment so clearly. Um, there was a church that I was quite associated with, a particular vicar that I was quite friendly with. And we decided we would use this church to carry out my dad's funeral and this particular vicar. And we went for the meeting with the vicar, and I said, why my dad? Why was my dad taken? He's 50. He has young children aged 10 and me and my sister. Why why did God take my dad? And he said, God only takes the good one. He wants the good ones for himself. And I remember actually not just thinking, I remember saying to him, well, what a selfish God your God is.
Yeah.
That's not my God. And from that moment on, that was it.
Yeah.
That was it. My whole view around death, faith, belief, afterlife, heaven, hell, just changed
Yeah.
completely
So
in that instant.
what was your faith?
So I was baptized Catholic. I didn't. We didn't particularly go to church. My mum was a Catholic. My grandmother was a staunch Catholic. My mum went to a convent school, but we weren't real practicing Catholics. We didn't go to church every Sunday. We went to church on special occasions. But I always kind of believed in God. I was never really into the Bible. I couldn't tell you chapters of the Bible, verses of the Bible. I wasn't that religious, but there was always a belief there that
Yeah.
people died, they went to heaven, there was a God, you were good in your life and good things happened to you when you died. That was kind of my belief. I suppose what most Christians believe, non-practicing Christians or
Like moderate
Catholics or
Christians.
whatever. Yeah, just what most people kind of believe,
Yeah.
that there's something after you die, and if you're good, you're rewarded for that.
So how old were you?
I was 20.
So were you already sort of having doubts, and this was a like final straw, or was it quite a sudden
No,
shift?
it was a sudden, almost like a switch went off,
Yeah.
and it never went back on again. I can remember sitting in the church on the day of my dad's funeral, just thinking, what a load of rubbish this is.
Right. Yeah.
Just yeah,
Did you
yeah,
did was it a consideration of like altering your faith? I'm just thinking from a devil's advocate point of view of a religious person listening and say, oh well, the priest, that was the wrong thing for the priest to say, and
yeah,
you can alter your faith to make it work for you. Have you
yeah.
ever thought that since or anything like that?
No, and this wasn't even a Catholic priest.
Right.
This was a Church of England church, and that was it. I just didn't believe in anything anymore. I
Mm,
became very pragmatic, very black and white, very philosophical. Just it's just what it is what it is.
mm.
You die, and that's it. And that got stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger as I grew and as more people died around me, which is what naturally happens. Obviously, as you get older, you lose more people.
So
But yeah,
do you think it's like, do you think you've lost any sort of wonder, and sort of I guess again, sort of playing devil's advocate, which is probably the wrong term to describe someone who's religious, isn't
yeah,
it? God's advocate, let's go with that. That's a lot more fitting. To play God's advocate, if you're, where was it going? Just completely lost it.
we were talking about just progression of faith and losing faith, and you said,
Yeah,
do you think you've lost more?
yeah. So, mm, completely. This has happened a few times in different episodes. I just go off a cliff.
See what a difficult subject it is.
But yeah, so So around then, you basically just like were it was just like no more.
Yeah, it switched off, and then with every death afterwards, it just compounded what I already knew.
Yeah. So
That
I think I know what I was going to say. So was it? Did you? Was there like a loss in sort of this sort of wonder and this sort of feeling of like acceptance, and religious people sort of would feel, it's a wonderful thing to think that you're gonna, see your family again, and it's a, again, playing God's advocate or whatever, it's a horrible
yeah.
thought to think that it's the end, and then the lights shut off and that's it. And whereas,
See,
if you
but
believe in an
for
afterlife,
me,
yeah.
the horrible thought is that there's something else.
Right.
I can't bear the thought that there are people that I've loved and known that are looking at me every day and almost passing judgment on your life, because that's kind of what people say and do. Oh, your dad would turn in his grave if he knew you were doing that. Or, oh, it's what
Right.
they would have wanted. They'd be so proud of you. Oh,
Mm.
your dad will be so proud of you now. I can't bear the thought of that. That fills me with absolute horror.
Was that
Just that they are somewhere else and not here.
right?
And that living in that waiting, do you know what I mean? That kind of limbo land of somebody waiting and passing judgment on you and watching you, but you can't see them and you can't be with them or touch them, or that to me is abhorrent. I can't bear the thought of that.
Mm. Do you think it could be a comfort if you were dying or something, that you'd know that you'd see them soon or something like that?
No, I don't have those feelings anymore. And I think working in the industry has, I mean, no, I have very, very strong views about death and dying, and they're not conventional.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so,
um, I,
sorry, carry on.
I think a lot of people who work in the industry probably share my views.
Yeah, so did you come across anyone who had faith or was particularly
No,
religious? No.
no. I mean, uh, I suppose a lot of them, you have to put on a facade that you do.
Hmm.
So when you're dealing with families, nobody wants to really think that that's the end. So, I'd be having discussions with family and they'd say, oh, I know he's lying here, but this isn't him. I know he's looking down on us and he would really like what you've done. And to me, I just think, oh my God, my goodness, that I can't comprehend that. I can't, but you can, you can't ever let your feelings come in. So it's not your
Hmm.
emotion. It's not your grief. It's not your beliefs. So everybody in front of family, and also to a certain degree around deceased, are very respectful. Um, yeah, and I suppose almost have a facade of they're somewhere else.
Hmm.
But whether a lot of them believe it or not is a different matter. So I would go in the morning into the mortuary and, morning, ladies and gentlemen, how are we all today? Just
Yeah.
because it felt the right thing to do when
Yeah.
there's, I don't know, 10 bodies there. It feels very weird to just walk in and ignore these people that all had a personality, all had a life, that all mean something to somebody.
Yeah.
The moment they become a piece of meat is the moment you shouldn't really do that job anymore.
Right. Right.
So although I would talk to them, it wasn't because I believed that they were looking down on me and, yeah, thinking, oh, she's nice, she's looking after me. It wasn't that at all. It was just a kind of natural thing to do.
Yeah, like to get you through the day type thing.
Yeah.
Is there parts of a typical funeral service that you think is just a load of just rubbish, like that you just think
All
is
of it, Daniel.
really?
All of it, yeah. For me, I believe that funerals are for the living, they're not for the dead.
Hmm.
Um,
So with
because
sorry.
because that person isn't there. That
Hmm.
they can't, in my opinion, in my view, in my beliefs, they can't see what's going on. They're gone. There's
Hmm.
nothing. It's only for the people that are living.
So what would you want your funeral to be?
I've had lengthy discussions with Hannah and your dad, and I've said I I don't care because I'm not going to be here.
Yeah.
So it makes no odds to me. You can put me out with the bins, throw me over the side of a ship. I don't care because I won't know.
Yeah.
So it doesn't bother me. But all I've said is I wouldn't want you to waste a load of money on a funeral,
Right.
but you do whatever you find comfort in. So whatever brings you comfort is what you should do. So if you want a horse-drawn carriage, if you want a 10-gun salute, you do it. It's not about me at that point. I'm gone. It's not about me.
So
It's what you want
so
on that day.
touch wood. If someone close to you died and you had the task of doing the funeral, and they had
Mhm.
they had the same thing as you, let's say it's
Mhm.
just you in reverse, and they're like, whatever you want, what would you do for someone you truly love? Like, what do you feel like there's, because obviously you wouldn't put someone in the bin, but like, what level of sort of like, I don't know, respect or care or all these sort of things would you have with someone if it was really up to you type thing?
Well, I think that's a very different thing because of other family members.
Right.
So, and that's the difficulty, isn't it? Because
Mm.
I know that I know Hannah knows my wishes,
Mm.
but God forbid if I were to die before my mum or my siblings, they would have a very different view on that.
Yeah. So,
And it isn't right for one person to steamroll another.
so
Um,
it's almost like the person with the strongest views wins out, really.
and that is usually what happens when people arrange funerals. I mean, I've had brawling families, and I mean physically brawling families
Wow.
over a funeral arrangement.
Yeah.
And it brings out the absolute worst in people. It brings out the best, but it brings out the absolute worst in people.
Like weddings.
And oh my God. And I sit there and think, what are you doing? This person's dead. They don't know. They
Yeah.
don't care. Let's just get this done. But obviously you can't. You can't. You have to facilitate everybody's needs around the table.
Yeah.
Um, it's a very difficult job. Funerals are a really touchy subject. I'd like to think God forbid your dad, I'd like to think I know your dad's wishes.
Mm.
I'd like to think that if your dad knew he was passing away, he would write something down as to his wishes. And that would be respected and honoured, of course.
Mm.
I think it's completely wrong to go against somebody's wishes, but that's not for me.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
that's not what I want.
you don't have to go into his wishes. I'd be really interested, and I'll definitely ask him at some point. Don't think it's something we talk about enough, as we said. But
No, nobody does because it's such an awful subject to talk about and so taboo.
does he have a similar view to you? Is he not too fussed, or has he got
Um,
certain things, or is it not? Has he not really mentioned it?
there, there's certain things that he doesn't want.
It to be
But
set in a gay strip club.
he doesn't want to go out with the bins. But yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because it wouldn't be entirely, it's not right for one person to steamroll, somebody's last wishes, is it?
I guess that's why it's like having last wishes is so important, because it can
Absolutely,
save a lot of arguments and all that sort of brawling
absolutely.
stuff. Yeah,
I
it's
mean, I I know what songs I want. Your dad knows what songs he wants. So I think we're kind of on the same page that there will be some kind of ceremony,
mm,
but um, I don't think either of us would want a lavish. But like I said, it's for me. It's not about me.
mm,
It's not about my wishes. If Hannah or your dad decided they wanted a big lavish funeral, nothing to do with me. But at that point, is it? I'm gone.
yeah,
I won't know.
yeah. So when you started had you worked in a similar industry before when you first started at the funeral home?
No, so I was a corporate buyer for most of my life, most of my working life.
So really different then.
Um, very different, very money orientated, very, making money for business, for companies. And I suppose after losing my dad, I became fiercely independent. I suppose very money hungry, uh, but not necessarily materialistic. I think those two things are quite different.
Mm.
So I always believed that money bought you choices, not happiness and things. And so I was very driven as a young adult, in my 20s, quite high powered, high flying jobs, earning quite a lot of money, which enabled me to buy my own property on my own at the age of 24, travelled extensively. And while I was young, I loved it. I loved making money, I suppose, and having choices and living a good life. And
Mm.
then I got made redundant. God, it must be 3 years ago now. Came away with a decent amount of money, sold a property that I made a decent amount of money on, and had hence loads of choices. I had enough money not to worry about working for a while, and so kind of didn't for a little while and couldn't decide what I wanted to do. Knew I wanted to work again, but couldn't decide what I wanted to do. And then I was just scrolling through a job site, saw a job advertised, thought, oh my God, that sounds interesting. No experience needed, full training given. That might be for me. What have I got to lose? So I applied, went through 7 stages of interview for the princely sum of £9.44 an hour,
Wow. Yeah.
which was a shock to me. But yeah, it started absolutely from my first minute. I absolutely knew it was what I should be doing.
Oh, really?
I knew that I should have done it years ago. Just I kind of I felt like it's not all about money anymore. I don't want to make money. I don't want to make money to line somebody else's pocket or really mine anymore. I want to do something that makes a difference. Um,
So what?
I've done some volunteering for a dementia charity, befriending dementia sufferers, and I just wanted to make a difference.
Mm.
And felt that sense of satisfaction from doing that job.
So what was the what were the things that struck you like? Because that job, like I can imagine, is literally people's nightmares for some people. Walking into a load
Absolutely,
of dead bodies. That is
absolutely.
literally
And
many people's nightmares. So
there
what?
are things that I will never forget that will stay with me for a long time.
Mm.
But I remember my first day walking into the funeral home, and I hadn't been in a funeral home since my dad died.
Mm.
I had no desire to see anybody dead after my dad died, so I'd never been in one. And I can remember opening the door and this smell hitting me and thinking, oh my God, I remember that smell.
Oh wow.
And it's such a distinctive smell that
Mm.
I remembered it. And I remember them taking me through to this little office, having a little chat. And then she said, right, okay, we'll give you a tour. We'll start in the mortuary. And I remember thinking, oh my God, what am I going to see? And sort of this nervous kind of excitement almost, like
Yeah.
just that curiosity of, I'm going to see something that not many people get to see
Mm.
in their life. Um, and we went to walk through the mortuary door, and somebody said, oh, um, are you taking Suzanne in there on her first day? She said, yeah. She said, oh, be mindful because baby so and so is out. And
Oh
I remember
wow.
thinking, oh, my boss turned to me and she said, are you going to be okay with that? There's a baby out. And I kind of said, well, I might as well see the worst I'm going to see first, and then I'll know whether I can do it or not, won't I? I
Yeah.
don't want to get 6 months down the line and then see that and realise it's not for me.
Mm.
And so we walked in, and there was a 4-week-old little baby boy being
Wow.
prepared, and that was my first, talk about baptism of fire.
Yeah.
Um,
So what was that
and I
like? Well, I know it's difficult to explain to describe a feeling, but what was
he
that
didn't, yeah, he didn't look real. He
like?
didn't look real. He was being dressed. He'd had a post-mortem and he was still bleeding a little bit, and the lady was dressing him, the lady who was preparing him. and I was watching and thinking, he doesn't really look real. He looked like a little dolly, and he she put this little hat on him, and she picked him up and put him in his casket. And as she picked him up, she kissed him on the head and she said, "Night, night, sweetheart." And she put him in this little casket.
Mm.
And I just remember thinking, oh, that's really sweet, but he doesn't look real. And I said to her, does that bother you? You know, what you've had to do to this little baby? And she said, you've got the worst job than I have. She said, because there's no emotion for me here, because I didn't know this baby in life. I'll never meet his family. I'll never see the grief behind this baby's death. She said, but you will see all of this, and you will also see the emotion behind that from the families. She said, and that's much harder.
Mm.
So my job was not solely the preparation of the deceased, although there was quite a bit of that. My job was mainly liaising with the families, arranging the funerals, looking after the deceased once they'd been prepared and were resting in our funeral home.
Right. So
I thought she explained that quite well, that there was that real detachment for her.
Mm.
And I did feel that going through. So I would look at these people and think, well, they're not my people. I don't know them. I didn't know them in life. I have no emotional connection with them. I have emotional connections with the family when they're crying and they're grieving, but I'm not upset because of this death, because it's nothing to me.
Do you think there has to be a sort of like what do you think it is about you and the way your mind works and the way you've grown, you've lived your life or whatever, that because some people would walk in there, they see a dead baby and they see, because the way you describe it to the normal person, that sounds like an incredibly sad and incredibly affecting thing.
Oh
And a lot of
God,
people don't.
I mean, I'm not heartless.
Mm.
I think I'm quite a compassionate, caring person. I don't, I have a heart. I don't have a swinging brick, but I just can very easily separate the two. I
Mm.
think is the difference. Yeah, I could look at that baby and think, oh my God, that's awful. What must that poor mother and father be going through? I'm a parent myself.
Mm.
There is that, but there isn't the grief for that infant, if you know what I mean.
Mm.
It's the grief for the people that are left behind, and that I suppose is what hits home to me. I
Mm.
don't particularly. This sounds awful. It's not that I don't care about the person that has died, but they're gone. There's nothing as far as I'm concerned. It's the people that are left behind that's the important part.
Yeah, and it can't be judged. I'm very interested in the mindset, and not because it's a judgmental thing or because I think it's bad. It's absolutely vital. Doctors need to do it every single day. And
Yeah,
nurses, and they need to. You can't get upset about every death. You can't get
no,
upset about every, illness, or it's just not possible. So we need, people who can make that distinction, or keep that separateness or whatever.
yeah. I think
Um,
it's a kind of self-preservation thing for me that I have.
mm,
In the year that I was doing the job, I only had a lump in my throat once in
right.
the whole time. And it wasn't even a particularly sad case. It was a very old lady who'd passed away of natural causes, had a brilliant life, had a lovely family, and her granddaughter brought a letter in for me to put in her coffin. And she said to me, I don't mind if you read it. And I wouldn't normally. Um, and as I walked out, she'd gone, and I went out in the chapel to go and put this letter in the coffin. And I turned the page over, and the first three lines just floored me.
Mm,
I thought, I can't read this. It's not really for me to read, and I wouldn't have read it had she not given me permission.
mm,
But two, it was just so heartbreaking,
mm,
but not because I felt sad for the lady that had died. It
mm,
was the people that were left behind. That sadness was for them.
yeah. Why do you think that got you? Do you know?
I suppose I think, maybe my daughter might write that about my mum.
Mm,
It was a line that says something like, "There's no sunshine in the world without you, Nanny." And yeah, that really did get to me.
Yeah.
And yet some of the horrific things I've seen don't get to me.
Mm.
And another, I suppose there was another case. We had a young lad who'd shot himself in the head. He was only 29, and he'd shot himself in the head in Florida. Been suffering from depression for, a long time. Took himself off to Florida, went to a gun range, was there for 2 hours, and then turned the gun on himself.
Mm.
And we were all kind of, oh God, what's he going to look like when he comes to us? What, are the family going to want to see him? How are we going to deal with this? And anyway, he was what we would call pretty much intact.
Right.
A very, very handsome young man. And he came to our funeral home in his coffin, dressed. He had his skinny jeans on, his really cool trainers, his hoodie. Someone had put his Beats headphones on his head with his hood up. And every time I went in to see him in the chapel, I would actually stand there and say, "You stupid boy.
Mm.
Why did you do that? You stupid boy." And that really got to me because it was so pointless and such a waste. And his family were torn apart. And that's what used to get to me.
Mm. So what was most of your job then? Was it dealing with the bodies? Like what? How would you sort of divide your time if you were to look over a normal week? Like what was the main bulk of what you were doing?
So every single day was different. Some mornings I'd come in. So most of us worked alone. So sometimes there would just be myself in the funeral home with one other person who may be the funeral director or one other person doing the same job as me. And we'd come in the morning. Often someone would have been brought in overnight. So our first job would be to look at the mortuary log, see who was brought in. We'd go to the refrigerated unit, check everybody in there, pull them out, check their condition, check their ID, make sure we had who we thought we had. And then from there, we would have families coming in to arrange funerals for those people. We would have doctors, GPs coming in to identify those bodies and do certain checks that have to be carried out when someone's cremated. So when someone's cremated now, two independent doctors come and have to visually inspect the body before it's touched or anything is done with it.
Right.
And that's since the Harold Shipman murders. So that's only for cremation. So we'd have doctors coming in and out. We'd have to pull bodies out, let the doctors have a look at them,
So what was that
put
then?
them
What was
away
the?
again.
Why was that brought in? Because of the Howard Shipman murders? What was that all about?
So Harold Shipman was the GP who was killing those of his elderly patients.
Right. Okay.
I'm not sure how many he killed, but he was killing lots.
Right.
And so now when somebody dies who's going to be cremated, so if you die in a nursing home or at home and it's an expected death, and you're going to be cremated, two doctors will come to the funeral home to examine the body.
Oh, okay.
So their normal GP will come, and someone who knows them, their normal GP will come and firstly identify them by looks if they can, and check the body for pacemakers. And then they will nominate a second independent doctor who will come and do the same, and they have to complete some cremation paperwork.
Right. So that's not done for unexpected deaths.
So that's done for expected deaths. So unexpected deaths are referred straight to the coroner.
Oh, okay.
So if you die at home unexpectedly, the funeral home that has the contract with the coroner will be nominated to come and remove that body. That body will be taken to the local hospital, and then the coroner will perform a post-mortem and report on it. And then the coroner will contact the funeral home and say, "We've got this person for you. The family wants to use you. Can you come and collect them?"
Right.
But
Right.
until the coroner has given that go-ahead, nothing can be done to those bodies. So we've had people that have died at home, and a doctor has been out and certified death at the site, or a paramedic has certified death at the place of death. They'll come to the funeral home, and then the coroner will ring and say, "Don't touch that body. I'm not happy with the circumstances around that death. And then they'll arrange for someone to come and pick them up, and a post-mortem will be carried out.
Right.
So that's why when bodies arrive with us, first off, they're not allowed to be touched. We're not allowed to do anything with them. They come in the state they're in, and they're left like that until the doctors have been, or the coroner lets us know that it's okay to proceed.
Why don't they go straight to the coroner then?
Because expected deaths don't need to go to the coroner for investigation.
Right. And what
But
about...
sometimes if someone dies at home and they've, I don't know, say they've got cancer, they were expected to live another 2 years, but they died within 6 months. If the GP hasn't seen them for 2 weeks, then it should go to the coroner.
Right.
Sometimes the GP can speak to the coroner and say, look, I'm happy with the circumstances around this death. Are you okay for me to sign it off? And the coroner will say, yeah, that's fine. But basically, coroner is God. He has the word. What he says goes. And if you're not sure, it will always be referred to the coroner.
Oh, okay. And
so if you die in hospital, all of that paperwork is done in the mortuary in the hospital. So 2 doctors will examine again in the hospital mortuary, and that body will be released to us when that's been done.
Right. Okay.
So it depends where you die, how you die, what you die of, the circumstances around your death. So most of the bodies that would be brought into us overnight would be care home deaths. So elderly people that have died in care homes, it's, a natural causes death or unexpected death.
Yeah. And were there any parts of the process or behind the scenes of funerals that you think people should know about, or there's certain aspects of it that were surprising to you? Or like as you went along and you learned more and more, like what sort of stuff did you find out?
Well, I had a rough idea of what happened. After my dad passed away, I dated a funeral director for a little while.
Okay.
So the funeral director that happened to do the funeral of my dad. Now read into that what you like. I did date the funeral director for a little while.
Probably something Freudian somewhere, but I'm not smart enough to
probably, yeah. But so I did have a rough idea, and I say a rough idea. I mean, I never really delved too deeply, but I had a rough idea of what happened. But I think the most shocking thing for me was watching somebody be embalmed.
So what is that?
So embalming is a preservation treatment, basically, a hygienic preservation treatment. It's where all the fluids, everything that's inside your body, basically, is flushed out, including your blood, and is replaced by chemicals, which they don't preserve you indefinitely. They just slow down the natural processes that happen.
Do you have to have that when you die?
No, you don't. No, you don't. Okay. And depending what you die of, you can't have it in certain circumstances.
Right.
And there's 2 very different processes involved. So if you have a post-mortem, and if you don't have a post-mortem, it's a very, very different procedure. So they will go into one of the main arteries, basically put a pump through you, pump out all your blood, and pump in all the chemicals through your circulatory system.
So when you pump out the blood, they become completely pale? Or are they pale anyway?
They're pretty pale anyway.
Is there like
if you're lucky, they're pale.
Okay. If there's let's just say a normal body, not like too deformed one anyway or whatever. When you take the blood out, is there any difference really, or looks pretty much the same?
No, not really. No, not really. And do you know the surprising thing about this whole process? All of that fluid goes down the normal drain.
Wow.
I will never drink tap water again. I was so shocked. The lady that was doing it, she was this tiny little French girl. I mean, tiny. We had this huge lady on the slab, and she was incredible the way she was moving, this lady. And I was just standing there, like, mouth open. I said to her, where's all that going? Went down the drain. I beg your pardon? Down the drain? She said, yeah, why? I was like, what? Yeah, down the drain. Like it was the most normal thing. There's no laws about it at all. So,
Wow.
anything infectious or just go down the drain.
Wow.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, there's certain infections that you can't embalm a body. So if somebody is infectious, they've got sepsis, for example, or bacterial meningitis, there's certain things that, hepatitis, lots of the bloodborne diseases, you can't embalm somebody.
Right.
But everything else, you
Wow.
can, and it just goes down the drain.
So we've all been drinking blood
So,
our whole lives.
not just blood, Daniel.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
That's the least of your worries.
Oh, God.
But so, embalming of somebody who hasn't had a post-mortem is quite brutal, but not so brutal because the circulatory system is still intact. So, the chemicals can flow around the circulatory system. Obviously, when you've had a post-mortem, there is no circulatory system still intact. Your organs are in a plastic bag in your stomach cavity.
Ah.
So there is no
What, they
kind
put the
of
organs back in a plastic bag?
in a plastic bag, yeah,
Ah.
including your brain.
Wow.
So the lady that we were embalming had a post-mortem, and I I was absolutely shocked at what I was seeing. I just stood there with my mouth open, just just dumbstruck. Just there was this little tiny woman, and she just opened up this huge like line of sutures down this lady's front. Opened her up. Oh, here's the breastbone. Let's take that off. Put that on the table next to her. And I mean, that in itself is quite wow. And then she pulled out this huge yellow bag. Like, what's that? Oh, well, that's all her innards and her brain. I was like, okay. And she said, come here and have a look at this. So there I was with my head in this stomach cavity that was completely empty. It was just a rib cage, and I could see the back of the spine. And she said, look up there. And I looked up what would have been her throat into an empty head, just a skull. I just remember thinking, oh my God, that's amazing. Just incredible, incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. So she has to find the end of every kind of major vein and artery. So each of the arms is done separately. She pulled the vein through from inside, through the chest cavity, connected her pump to the vein of her arm, embalmed her arms, then did her legs, and then found veins in her head and did her head. And it was incredible. This lady went from green colour in places to pink.
What? So the chemicals make you, they're like coloured, or they make you coloured type thing?
Yeah, so they make you give a lot more lifelike appearance.
Right.
So this lady, one of her ears was green and all kind of squashed up where she'd been lying on it. And it just kind of came back to life. It just
Wow.
opened up and came pink again.
Do you only do that for open caskets, or?
No, some people want it done anyway. It is more hygienic to have it done.
Okay.
It's better for the people in our industry for it to be done, especially if there's a long wait between death and funeral. But you don't have to have it done.
What I'm quite interested in is, I feel like you respect the people who are dead, which is interesting. So how do you sort of, what are your sort of thoughts around that? Because obviously, like you say, they're dead. They don't know what's going on. Like, how do you feel respect for these people if they don't know what's going on? Like, what's the reason to be respectful of them in your opinion?
I think for me, I'm the kind of person that I don't really care what people think about me. So I don't care if people want to stand in judgment of me. The people I love and care about, obviously I care what they think about me. Anybody else, I don't care. I don't live my life for the praise or judgment of anybody else. Do you know, other than the people that I love and care about, obviously.
Yeah. You more live by your own values, and if you can look yourself in the mirror, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I don't look after and respect these people because I feel they are looking at me and judging me and praising me.
Mm.
I respect these people because it's the right thing to do. They were somebody. They had a purpose. They had a family. And it's the last thing I can do.
Mm.
But, okay, this person doesn't know that, but I know that.
So you
So
think
I know that it's the right thing to do.
so you think there's some aspects of when people have died of even though, you know, funerals themselves you don't believe, you know, need to happen and the sort of traditional ways of doing things, but you do believe that it is right to treat a body with respect. Like it
Oh,
would
God,
it wouldn't,
absolutely.
you know, I know you were joking, but like putting a body in the bin, you know, that, you know, there's, you still feel that you need to treat the body respectfully. It's not a case of just whatever,
Absolutely.
anything goes
No,
type thing.
no, no, no. And, you know, I have seen some of that and it's given me sleepless nights. I
Mm.
couldn't, I couldn't bear to think that anything I've ever done or said was disrespectful. I remember once standing in a chapel with a colleague and there was this little old man lying in there and we were talking about him and she said something, not anything about him, but she said something and I laughed. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I laughed in front of this dead person. That's awful. Yeah, it felt really disrespectful to me
Mm.
to laugh. I wasn't laughing about him or anything to do with him. She just said something and I chuckled. And I really had to stop myself and think that, no, that's not right. Not that he knows or anyone knows or anyone's judging me, but for me, that felt very wrong.
So why does that feel wrong? And why does it? Why do you think it's right
I
to
don't
treat a
know.
body with respect?
Like I said, it's my morals and my ethics, I suppose. I don't do it for them. I do it for me.
Mm.
I don't necessarily do it for that person because that's not a person anymore. You know, I don't correlate that thing lying there. That I don't mean to call it a thing, but do you know what I mean? That the
Yeah.
remains of that person, I do not correlate with it being a person anymore. When you've seen what I've seen, that ceases to become human almost. And that sounds awful because I'm always mindful of the person that they were, but it isn't a person anymore.
Mm.
That sounds quite callous and quite cold, but I
No, but
don't mean it like that.
it's interesting to me because it's sort of like there's a sort of conflict, and don't get me wrong, I
Yeah,
completely relate because
yeah,
I'm not religious. I don't believe that, you know, there's an afterlife and that sort of thing. But let's say, you know, I was alone with a dead body and no one would
mm,
ever find out if I just, you know, chucked it on the floor or slapped it in the face or, you know, was just generally disrespectful to it. So it's not,
yeah,
but I instinctually feel that I would have to be respectful to that. Let's say I don't know the person, you know, just a
yeah,
random person. And
yeah,
and it's weird, isn't it? Because, you know, everything you've been saying in the first, you know, 20 minutes or whatever,
hmm,
it you know what I mean, from an outside perspective it could
yeah. No,
sort of
I
go
do.
like, well, it doesn't really make sense then, you know,
No,
if no one's watching you, the body doesn't know. It's, maybe it's a human thing, maybe it's a sort of recognition that this is another human being, and
yeah,
to disrespect it, whether it's alive or dead, is to sort of deny them their humanity, maybe.
yeah,
uh,
maybe. I think, I think for some people, it's maybe they do believe that they're not gone and that they are watching, and there's some form of judgment,
hmm,
so that prevents it.
hmm,
I don't have that feeling. I always I think about my feelings and for me what I would feel if I did that.
hmm,
I couldn't sleep in my bed if I had been disrespectful
hmm,
to a body. And I certainly couldn't look a family in the eye afterwards.
hmm,
Absolutely not. I have seen disrespect in the industry and I have had to face families and, you know, they don't know and God, it's a blessing they don't know, but I know.
hmm.
And that's really difficult. That's really difficult. You know, I struggled with that.
So was that one of the worst, the the worst
Yeah.
aspects of the job.
And that's what made me leave in the end.
Right.
Yeah, I couldn't be around that. I couldn't sleep at night.
Mm.
And not because of judgment. It was because of me, my feelings.
Mm.
I couldn't be around that. I couldn't be a part of that. When you start being like that in that job, you shouldn't be in that job anymore. And I can see how it happens over a long period of time. I can see how it happens. I'm not excusing it, but I can see how it happens. You do get very, I suppose, hardened to
Mm.
it. Um, and I suppose I've seen a lot of complacency around it, but I would never allow that to happen. I've told myself that will never happen to me.
Do you
I
think?
won't
Do you
be
think
that
you almost
person.
have to see it? Like, I know this is sort of going against what you said, but do you think you
Yeah,
almost
I
have to see
suppose.
it as more than a body? Do you think you almost, the people that treat it with no respect, and I don't know if you want to give any examples of when a body's been disrespected, but do you think what sets you apart is that it's not just a body, it's not just a piece of meat? Do you think you have to see it
I
as
think
more than that?
I think most of the disrespect I've seen has been from people who will never meet the families.
Right.
So people who are back of office who will never have to see those families. You know, it's very easy, isn't it, to just look on it. It's just a job and it's just an object. It's just garbage disposal, really, isn't it? It's just a form of disposal. You're disposing of remains that are not required anymore.
Mm.
And it's easy to think like that when you are not seeing the grief behind that death, when you're not seeing the people. I will sit with a family and arrange a funeral and I will hear their life story.
Mm.
And that's maybe what it is. Maybe that's the difference.
Yeah. And what?
And we've had bodies come in and they are just a body. And then I'll sit with the family and they'll tell me about that person. And then the next time I see that person, I think, God, you were amazing, weren't you?
Mm.
Do you know, you did this and that in your life. You're incredible. And that's maybe that's the difference.
Yeah, and I think for me that sounds like you're seeing it as more than a body. You're seeing it as memories. You're seeing it as a person who's
Yeah,
lived a life.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And then I do have the times when I would open the fridge and there'll be 4 bodies in there. And I think to myself, you're all the same now, aren't you? But you know what I mean? I
yeah,
think
yeah,
it doesn't matter how much money you had, Fred, or how much money you had, Mildred. You're all the same now. And the same thing's going to happen to all 4 of you. No
yeah,
different, you know?
yeah, yeah. And what were some of the best parts of your job? What parts did you love about it, and the moments that made you want to stay?
Yeah, the families that you're dealing with. I mean, I had a lady very early on in my job come in. She'd lost her husband. She was absolutely devastated. They'd been married for 60 years. She was in a terrible state. And just holding her hand throughout that whole journey, she didn't have a clue of how to arrange a funeral, what she needed to do, all the paperwork. She just didn't have a clue. Wasn't even on this planet. She was, distraught. And
Mm.
she would come in every day and just want to talk and just, you know, she might go in the chapel and sit with her husband for a little while, but I honestly believe she came in to see me, to talk,
Wow.
to chat and to have a cup of tea and and we'd chat about everything. How's your day been? What have you been doing? And blah blah blah. And after the funeral, and she asked me to go on the funeral, I went on the funeral, and we don't often get to go on the funerals. Unless a family member asked you to go. And I went on this particular funeral. And she came in a little while later to pay her bill and to sort some things out. She grabbed my hand and she said to me, Suzanne, in all of that darkness, you were the light.
Oh wow.
And and I thought, oh my God, I don't care about the £9.44 an hour.
Mm.
I'd do that for nothing. Do you know what I mean? It's just,
Mm.
and then another old man who'd lost his wife, a similar thing, and he had nobody. He'd lost his daughter 10 years before to a brain tumour, his only daughter, and he'd lost his wife and he had nobody. And again, I helped him and he'd come in every day, and that was really difficult. Old men crying was really, really difficult. There was something. really quite horrible about a man crying, an older man crying.
Mm.
And I am a bit of a sucker for an old person. I do like old people.
Mm.
And he'd come in and cry, and it was awful. I just didn't know what to do, you know. What do you do? What do you say? And after his wife's funeral, he came in with this beautiful professionally handmade cake for me that said thank you across the top of it. And the people used to come back. You know, the little lady that said I was the light, she'd pop in probably once a fortnight just for a cup of tea.
Wow.
You know, 9, 10 months after her husband had died, she'd just come in. Have you got a minute for a cup of tea? And I'm like, of course I have. You know, she'd sit and tell me how she's getting on, and you became sort of like a counsellor almost for these
Mm.
people, like a little flock of bereaved that would come in and see you long after their loved one's funeral.
Mm.
It was a very strange job, very strange job.
And do you
You
think
know,
you'd
to
do it
go
again?
from, yeah, I'd love to. I love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, it's emotionally draining, it's tiring, it's hard work, it's physical. Um, you have to have a really strong stomach at times. Um, and people are weird. There's no
Mm.
doubt about that. um, and you see, you know, all walks of life and how all different people handle grief differently.
Mm.
Um,
Do you think
and
you'd prefer to
that's
do the more the people side of it? Like if you could do less
yeah,
of the
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. You know, that was the bit that I really liked. That was the rewarding bit.
Mm.
That was the rewarding bit. Apart from when you have warring families and people banging their heads against the wall in grief,
Mm.
that's quite challenging. That's challenging. But yeah, I loved it. I loved it. But I mean, yeah, people are weird. They are weird. People ask you to do such strange things, very weird things. But I have to say, in the year that I was in that job, I have not laughed like that in any other job.
Really?
I mean, proper belly laugh some days.
Mm.
And we're not laughing at people or being disrespectful, but some things are just really funny.
Yeah.
Just really funny. I, I'll tell you a quick story. So we had a local guy, a young guy, who 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 died in his 40s. I think he'd lived life quite hard and fast, but he was well known in the area, and our funeral director knew him. She used to go to school with him, and his family had brought several things in to put in the coffin, and we have to document everything, put it all on the computer. Every single thing that comes in to go into a coffin with somebody has to be receipted, has to be documented. And then on the day of the funeral director comes, checks everything in the coffin against the inventory on the computer, and then we say a few words and we close down the lid of the coffin, and they go on the hearse. So the funeral arrived this day, and she said to me, "Oh, I've come to do so and so." She said, "I'm going to go and do a personal effects check." And she goes with a second person to double check everything. So to check jewellery and anything else that might have been put in the coffin. And they were about to go, and it was around about the time of sport relief. Um, and she came flying out from the back. She said, "Suzanne," she said, "I've got everything in there." She said, "but the computer says red nose, and there's no red nose in there." And I said, "Red nose?" And she said, "Oh, it's so typical of him." She said, "You know, he was such a joker." She said, "I'm not at all surprised that he wanted to go out with a red nose on." And I remember thinking, I don't remember taking a red nose. You know, I took all the personal effects,
Yeah.
put them all on the computer. I said, "There was no red nose." She said, "It doesn't matter." She said, "I'll nip to the shop and get one." She said, "You know, if it was important to him, it was important to him. Red
Yeah.
nose." So she got halfway out of the door and I thought, oh my God, it wasn't a red nose. It was a red rose, and I've typed it in the computer wrong. So now I am shouting up the road, "Twitter, come back. It's not a red nose. It's a red rose." And she said, "Oh my God, we almost sent him out with a red nose on. Imagine." And it's things like that that just, you know, crack you up. Just funny things that happen.
Yeah. And that's a great idea of how to go out. You know, if you go in a coffin as well, you know, go out with a red nose on.
Going start with a red nose on. And then we had another lady who, oh my God, her mum, she was like a really poor version of Joanna Lumley, this daughter that was left behind. She was really scatty, Like if Joanna Lumley and Ab Fab,
Yeah,
really
yeah.
scatty, really nutty. And her mum was this tiny, tiny little lady in the coffin. She was obviously a really elegant lady in her time, you could tell, but she was really old. And she was being cremated, and the daughter came in and she said, "Oh, I've got Mum's fur coat." She said, "I've brought them in. Can you put them in the coffin with her?" Well, these coats were enormous. I thought, there's no way they are going in that coffin with her and the lid going on. They are massive. So anyway, there we were, shoehorning these coats in and like putting the lid down. She said to me, "Yeah, I really want Mum to have her fur coats because I don't want her getting cold, and you don't know what the weather's going to be like where she's going." And inside I'm thinking, she's being cremated. I don't think she's going to be cold. Uh, so yeah, there are some funny stories.
Yeah. No, it's
Funny
great, and
stories.
I guess it's also like a coping mechanism as well. You know, always you need to laugh and you need to keep that light mood, don't you, in that sort of job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
So
Yeah.
so how would you, as a society? I mean, I don't know if it's a British thing. I know that other societies, you know, every sort of culture treats death slightly differently. And I feel
Mhm.
like, you know, I've experienced some cultures that, in my opinion, in some ways, have a really healthy attitude to death.
Yeah.
What would you like to see happen, like in our culture, in our society, in the way we approach death? What do you think would be a healthy approach than maybe the one that we take now?
I don't know. I think it needs to be brought out in the open.
Mm,
And whether that's done as taught as a subject in school, because let's face it, it happens to all of us.
mm,
Um, we teach sex education, we teach about birth. Why don't we teach about death?
mm,
You know, there doesn't have to be, too much detail around it, but it's not even discussed. I'm so open with my daughter. I mean, she hates it. She hates the job I do.
mm,
But we, the company I worked for were very much into community spirit. And last Christmas we had a switching on of the local Christmas lights. And we opened up the funeral home in the evening, and we had mince pies and tea and coffee. And lots of people that had dealt with us came back and had, a cup of tea with us and a mince pie. And Hannah was having a friend's day over, and I said, "Well, we're going to do the light switch on. Do you want to come?" "No, I'm not coming. I'm not coming in that place. It stinks." And I was like, "Look, you don't have to come inside. You can stand outside and help with the teas and coffee." So she said, "Okay, okay, I'll come." So we go, her and her little friend. So my daughter's 15. So she said, "I'm not going in. I'm going to stay outside." I was like, "Okay." So it starts raining. So she said, "Oh, can we go inside?" So I was like, "Well, you can, yeah. You know, we've got a front of office, a reception area with, rooms and stuff." So in they go, and they're sitting inside, and they're turning their nose up, and it smells in here. What's behind that door? So I said, "Well, that's the chapels of rest." So what's in there then? So I thought, well, there's nobody in either of them at the moment, but that's where, the open coffins would be, and people will go and visit their loved ones in there. Can we have a look? And my boss was there, and she's very much, let's get death out in the open, let's not sweep it under the carpet. So I said to her, "Can I take the girls into the chapel?" So she said, "Yeah, yeah, of course, absolutely, do what you want." So I took them in the chapels, and they were looking around, and they were like, "Oh, right, okay, so that's the chapels." And then on the other side of the corridor is the mortuary door. So she said, "What's in there?" So I said, "Well, that's the mortuary." "Well, what happens in there?" "Well, that's where some bodies are prepped. That's where bodies are stored. That's where people in their coffins will lie and rest in there until they go into the chapels." "Oh, right. Is there anyone in there?" So, well, yes, there's a draped coffin in there with somebody in there, but, the coffin's draped in a sheet. There's nothing to see. And yes, there's people in the refrigerated unit. "Oh, right. Okay." And they're standing there. So we finish up for the evening, and my boss says, "Right, okay, we're going to go out the back through the mortuary." So um, the girls are like, "What? What? I don't want to go in there. I don't want to go in there." So she said, "Come on, there's nothing to see. There's not. I wouldn't take you in there. It would be completely unethical for me to take you in there if there was anything to see. There's nothing to see. There's just a coffin with a sheet over it. That's all there is." "Oh, okay then." So they walk through the mortuary, and they're sort of eyeing up this coffin in the corner, and then they sort of walk past the fridge. well, what's in there? So my boss said, well, there's some deceased in there. Can we have a look? So she went, absolutely not. But they went from, I'm not even stepping in the door,
Yeah.
to wanting to see a dead body in the space of half an hour.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's not anything to be afraid of. And I say to my daughter, the dead can't hurt you. It's the living you need to be afraid of.
Yeah. And
And
it
so
sort of,
maybe we should have more of that, I don't know, that opportunity, that discussion around it.
yeah, and it sort of ties in with your first experience going in as well. You know, this sort of like excitement and yet nervousness. That's probably
Yeah,
what your daughter felt as well. It's
yeah,
this, and I guess we would all have it. You know, the people that would judge or to say, like, oh, you know, I want to keep away from it. I bet in all of them deep down, if they were to do the same steps as well by
yeah.
walking in, and they would have that, even if they didn't voice it, they'd have that
It's that
same curiosity.
curiosity.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's that unknown. Not many people know what happens to you when you die.
yeah.
And it is that unknown. You know what happens to you when you're born. You know what happens to you when you go into hospital and you have surgery and all the rest of it. But you don't really know what happens to you after you die. And I think people should know that's your person. That's your loved one. Why shouldn't
Mm.
you know? Why wouldn't you want to know what's going to happen to them?
And also, it's
It's,
yeah, like you say, it's like it's an understanding of what death is. Just to do a quick story of this woman we stayed with in New Zealand. So me and Emma, we went to different sort of farms around the country, and we'd like volunteer and get our food and accommodation paid for, or whatever. But one woman had lost her husband only like
right.
only a month before we got there. Like it was, I mean, it may have
Oh
been a
God,
bit
yeah.
more, it might have been 2 months or, but it was really recent. And
Fresh, yeah.
we actually she mentioned it candidly, like in messages back and forth when we were setting up going
Mhm.
there to stay for like a week and a half, and we were like, oh god, no, like, oh, sorry, didn't realize, you know. And she was like, no, it's fine. And first of all, she was very open about it. She did, the second time she talked about him, she did cry, but which was
Yeah.
amazing, the fact that, you know, she'd known us a few days and she was able to talk about him and cry in front of us and stuff. But
Yeah.
so there was that, but also she described the funeral,
Right.
and it was a mix of sort of typical sort of Western funeral and Maori funeral. So Maori are like the indigenous population in New Zealand,
Mhm.
and basically they there was a few things. So you have they did this whole ceremony of bringing the open casket to the house, and they did all these songs, and they kept him in the house in an open casket for 2 days or something.
Yeah.
I may be
Yeah.
getting all the details wrong, but this is
No,
basically what it
that
is.
is common. Catholics do that.
Oh, really? Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. We've
And
had that, yeah.
you're not. I don't know if this is the same, but you're not allowed to leave the body alone.
I'm not so sure about Catholics do that, but yeah.
So they weren't allowed to leave the body alone. So it was never allowed to be in a room by itself. So she had to sleep with it in the same room with her.
Oh God.
Um, but and she just talked it all through, and it just sounded really. And people would come and visit. You know, they come and visit and look at the
Yeah.
body, and she said there was this moment when this very young child came in, and they were a little bit sort of, oh, we don't know what, you know, how they're going to react,
Mhm.
and she just went up to the body and she looked at it, and, you know, this sort of curiosity, too young to maybe really understand fully, you know, whereas Hannah can sort
Yeah.
of picture all these nightmarish things, you know.
Yeah.
But she sort of looked at the body and like touched the skin and sort of went, oh, Uncle Bill or whatever his name is dead. And it's just this sort
Yeah.
of like acceptance and like, yeah, that's right. And it just seemed, and then they did a whole procession through the street, and it was really lovely, just a lovely whole ceremony, to be honest. But
Yeah.
there was just so much in there of, you know, the fact that she was talking to us about it, the fact that the way their tradition was going, it just seemed to have a really healthy aspect to it
Yeah.
of just like, well, this
Relationship
person's,
with death.
yeah, and this person is dead. I mean, obviously, you know, sleeping with a dead body in your room for 2 nights, some people would say, well, that's horrible, but there is, I guess, a sort
But
of,
what's that's what I don't understand. What's horrible?
yeah, yeah.
That's what I say to my daughter. What's horrible? What's disgusting? Yeah, I get that the smell is horrible, and I get the physical horribleness of it more than anyone. But yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Why that's horrible? Why the idea of it is horrible?
Maybe it's
And
too
some people
many.
might not even know about the smell, but
Yeah.
would still say it's horrible.
Maybe it's too many horror
Yeah.
films.
Yeah, my sister used to say to me, "How do you sit in that place with 10 dead bodies? Are you not creeped out?" I'm like, "No, why am I creeped out? I'm not doing anything. They're just laying there. What's there to be creeped out about? Oh, you're weird. You're weird. It's not weird.
To be fair,
What's
though,
weird about it?"
if there is a zombie apocalypse, you'll be the first to go because
They'll all come alive.
yeah.
No, they'll all like me because I'm being nice to them. Because I'm talking to them every day. Oh, hello, Bill. You're looking very handsome today. Mildred, not so.
Oh, well, I think we'll probably wrap it up about there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah.
So just before we go, Dan, what
Yeah.
are your views on death and afterlife and funerals, just briefly?
If I was to say it briefly, like I sort of mentioned before, I'm not religious, so I sort of feel the same as you. It's for the living, like funerals and stuff. Yeah, I'm not really. I feel like I'd have some feelings of how I'd want a funeral to be. I quite like the idea of being made into compost. Or some people are like, like you made into compost and then you put that compost around a tree, like a baby tree or something. You can
become a mushroom suit, Dan.
A what?
Did you know that? A mushroom suit.
A mushroom suit.
So they put you in this suit and they grow mushrooms from you.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I like that. I like these sort of crazy ideas. So this is what I like that, and I think this sort of idea of celebration, have a bit of fun with it, and it doesn't have to be all this sort of black and white, a suit and all this sort of thing. I'm quite a creative type anyway, but I quite like the idea of just doing something a bit different, and I like the idea of and even not for me, for other people I know who are into nature and stuff, having a tree for them, or whatever. So I think in summation, that's how I feel about it. I feel that I like the idea of doing something a bit different and making it sort of a bit of a nice celebration, and that's sort of a summation really of what I have feel about it and stuff.
But if your family members disagreed with that, what would be more important to you, their comfort or what you want? So say, for instance, your girlfriend or your mum wanted a huge, something completely different.
Right. Or let's say they wanted a very traditional sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think if it was that...
Are your wishes more important or their wishes?
I think if it was that important to them, then fair enough. I like to think that my family and friends are, considerate enough to actually respect my wishes. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want it to be a point of contention. And the same, if someone close to me died, I'm sort of the same as you. I mean, if Dad died, again, touch wood, I would bring ideas to the table. I've got, memories or things that I might want to include, but I wouldn't want it to get to a point where it ever became, a point of contention. And if someone, whether it was my mum or my girlfriend or whoever, felt very strongly about, I think I might have a bit more to say if it was going to be overtly religious.
Right. Okay.
Just because it's not very much, it's not me. And I think you do, even though I wouldn't be there for it, I would like the idea that people...
It has to be about you,
it's sort of... people want to remember me, not as someone who was super religious and believed I was going to be spending my time with Jesus after death. And so, as long as it wasn't too far from me, I wouldn't mind too much. But yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Are you sort of the same? It sort of seems like you're probably.
No, I couldn't care less. I'm
Yeah.
not going to know,
Okay.
am I?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't care. I really, and that's where I struggle,
Yeah.
because to me, I don't care.
Yeah.
Do what you want. I'm not going to know.
Well, it makes it
Whatever you
easier.
want.
Makes it easier,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
absolutely. Whatever you want. But I am going to have Another One Bites the Dust as my song.
Nice, nice. And a red nose on.
Absolutely. And a fur coat. Can't be getting cold in that
Well,
crematorium.
maybe you should wear sun cream if you're going to.
Yeah, possibly.
Apparently, it gets quite hot in those cremations.
It gets very hot, Daniel. I've seen it. I've been backstage at the creme. It's quite scary. Quite scary. Scarily hot. And you do only get your ashes, by the way. The common myth that you get everybody else's ashes in your urn afterwards is just a myth.
Oh, I haven't
You
heard
do
that.
only get your ashes. Oh, people always say, oh, don't you get everyone else's ashes who's been in there before? No, you only get yours.
Fair enough. Fair enough. You have to pay extra for a cocktail of ashes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. All right.
Oh, it's been good talking to you.
Yeah, no, it really has. And like you say, it's a really important subject. And I think what I would hope to see from societies is, and I guess my story was hinting towards it, but just people just talking about it more, it not becoming, so separate. So, and like, it's like any taboo subject, really, it's the more that you talk about it, the more that people accept it and understand it's a part of life.
The easier it becomes, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of those brawls and arguments that, you're talking about, I think they can be dissipated if people are of a more understanding earlier on.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Cool. All right. Well.
Okay, a mushroom suit it is for you then.
Yes.
Dan.
Yeah. I'm gonna remember that. I'm gonna have to write that down. Sweet. All right. Well, thank you so much, Suzanne.
You're welcome.
Speak to you soon.